Hello, and welcome to Facts Under Precise Analysis. I am Gavin. Joe, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Joe. We've also got Callum and Josh.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Today we'll be talking about the 19th century unification of Italy. We'll be focusing on Mazzini and Garibaldi, just generally their lives, their obstacles, what did they face, how were they wrong, how did they hinder the process of unification, how did they help the process of unification, and overall, generally, were they a help or were they a hindrance?
Yep. So we should probably begin with the context of what Italy is going through, particularly in 1930s to start off with. So,
yes,
at this point, Italy, a couple of years after Napoleon's empire sort of collapses, the Napoleon Code of Law gave Italy some freedoms that it's never really experienced before under the feudal systems of its local governments, under the absolute monarchs that have returned at this point. This has left the public with a lot of newfound freedoms, which got taken off of them pretty much immediately.
It was split into six sort of
provinces. A toy.
Italy was Italy was split into 6 provinces and was pretty not unified by the 30s, by the early 30s, basically all the way up to about 49, 50. It was trying to get unified, from about 1800 with the Carbonari. But generally didn't really succeed and was put down not only by the Piedmont, not only by the Piedmontese government, but also by.
But you can't deny it, the Carbonara is a nice pasta.
Oh my god, shut up!
Not only by the Piedmontese government and all the other Italian governments and powers, but also international powers such as Spain and France and places like that. It basically, the split up state of Italy inspired people like Garibaldi and Mazzini to want to sort of get unification, and it all started really for Mazzini in 1827 when he did join the Carbonari, which was a group
racing for me to mention pasta there.
Yes, I was waiting. I also hope I didn't. It was a group that was set up to with political aims of unification
and of the sort of diplomatic system as well at the time.
Yeah,
which I mean is understandable because having a country split up is not really the best thing for it.
I mean, early on, particularly, most countries just wanted a sort of diplomatic system under a constitution. Yeah. You don't really get a unification goal till much later on.
No, but
yeah,
when you go first,
it is sort of the eventual thing that people would have wanted.
Yeah, it was especially with Mazzini and Garibaldi. Garibaldi, in particular, becomes a very big national hero of sorts for the movement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I always think you.
That's all right. In 1827, when Mazzini does join the Carbonari, he basically straight away gets put into exile because the government put them down straight away. Gets put into exile to Marseille, and in the time between 1827, start of his exile, and 1831, he does a lot of thinking, a lot of writing, because he loved literature, and in that time he created Young Italy, which was basically his Carbonari, his way. His way to. That was so dad. So I'm sorry. That was so dad. So it was
comedy. I deal with this every day.
It was his way. It was his
imagine
way
he walks into a room. He starts at like Italian beatboxing.
We're getting off topic already.
It was his way to want the unification of Italy. He wanted to
put your hands up in the air.
He wanted to create a nation state. He wanted to create the nation state. He also wanted Italy to be unified as one, which was unseen before, because basically most people just thought that the North should be unified. However, Mazzini did want the South to be unified with the North together. He was pretty influential at the time, but not to the extent that he wanted to be. He was really only influential with the middle and the upper class because his writings
They're
were
the only
so
ones that could actually
complex.
read his letters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And only occasionally.
Yes, yeah, because he was in exile as well. It
Can
basically
only read if I want you to read.
yeah.
Otherwise, you are banned.
So it actually felt like that because his writings were so difficult to understand because he thought of himself as a scholar, and then because he was from an upper class to middle class background, his writing was high end, and then the fact that he was in exile as well meant that he couldn't interpret it and he couldn't lead Young Italy, he couldn't help Young Italy. So he basically, in the way he created the group, which inspired others like Garibaldi, and was key to unification. But he also sort of stole his own unification because the fact he wasn't there to help meant he couldn't actually do anything, couldn't actually lead himself, and couldn't show the people what his writings meant, sort of thing.
And then again, like being in exile as well, writing changes, like even little bits over short periods of time. So that had to have sort of messed up communication a bit.
Yeah.
A big problem here as well is it's an obstacle we've learned about quite a bit, especially in the Roman Republic, is the class divide. The working class in the Papal States during the Roman Republic, they're the ones that rose up against the new system during the uprising and actually allowed the Pope to return to power instead of the diplomatic system.
Yeah, they really dislike Mazzini. They're really fond of Garibaldi, but they really do dislike Mazzini because he was so complex and so upper class that he basically ignored the deep, the economic and diplomatic needs and wants of the lower class. And therefore, they didn't really feel like they should follow him. Didn't help him at all between any of his uprisings between 30 and 50, or even 70 if he had any. He was key for the middle and upper class to inspire the lower. So, like Garibaldi inspired the lower class. He was a working class hero.
We've intimidated Josh into silence with our big brains.
You have no idea what's going on.
I honestly have no idea what's going on.
He was key to Garibaldi and inspired him, but because of his writing, he just alienated all of the lower class, which, to be fair, I think is the main reason that stopped his progress, because it shows that he could actually never fully lead a unified Italy or lead a revolution for a unified Italy, because without the lower classes, which was the major...
Like the big bulk of the population.
Exactly. He couldn't do anything with it. So
particularly in the south.
Yeah,
the south
especially
is very, very poor.
I think it would have been completely different if he just said, if he did what Cavour did and said, I just want to unify the North. Because if he just wants to unify the North, great, they're all industrialised, economically stable. But the South, he wants to unify it all. And he clearly states that.
And then again, like, if he did just unify the North, like, if the South saw it sort of booming and prospering, eventually it would sort of try to follow, and it may have led to them both unifying into one country.
True, but I think because in a way the South was so far behind, they were all still farming and in very, very individual basis of your job and your role in farming and things like that. It was quite difficult for the North and South to sort of unify. And even in 1870s, 40 years later, when they actually do unify, there's still major issues because the North and South are so
still public outcry in the South because the system doesn't apply to both parts of the country.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I do think that Mazzini was his own biggest obstacle, really. The fact he chose to exile in London and was forced to exile in places like Marseille and all of this actually hindered him, because he could never fully prove his point. He could never fully lead. He could never fully be a strong leader.
So, like, he couldn't be there. He couldn't.
He had the ideas. He couldn't enforce them.
Exactly. But on the other hand, Garibaldi, he was absolutely the complete opposite. He wasn't a thinker, but he was definitely a doer.
He was a freedom fighter, whereas Mazzini is the philosophist of sorts.
Yeah, without you, the
Holiday
only
philosopher.
very true. The only thing that you could say in the benefit of Mazzini, I think, is the fact that the Rome Republic worked and the fact that he inspired Garibaldi. But I think his writings were basically pointless. Young Italy was almost pointless, and without Garibaldi, it would be completely pointless, I feel. Because
So what you're saying is he sort of like he laid down the groundwork, so like he had the basis of everything, and
precisely, exactly.
Garibaldi.
Giuseppe Two Electric Boogaloo came round.
Garibaldi into the
built
60s,
everything.
still following Mazzini's principles.
Yeah. So like even if he wasn't perfect with getting everything he wanted, he was still very, very influential with what he did.
Yeah. I do think that Garibaldi was the far superior person in the goal of unification towards Italian unification. But without Mazzini, as I was saying before, laying the groundwork, none of that could have happened. So I think we should probably move on to fully onto Garibaldi now.
Mr. Garibaldi.
Because Mazzini is only really up to 50, and Garibaldi
comes pretty much. Well, he's in and out.
He comes into it massively after 50. Really, it's like that it was sort of a swap. He's important in the 40s because obviously he fights with Mazzini uprisings in the 30s, which failed, but it shows that the people actually do want an uprising.
Yeah,
but like
it shows that it's working.
Yeah, it shows that it's sort of working because it shows that Young Italy works. It doesn't really show that like an uprising could work yet. Because the one issue I found with the Rome Republic was with talking of uprisings and republics and all this was that it was successful, but it was only short lived, and it proved that yes, Mazzini's ideas could work, but it also proved that they needed more support and they needed probably international powers for it actually to work.
Yes, sort of like by itself, it was more like an explosion. So like it started off big and sort of flashy, but it fizzled out really quickly without anything to keep it going.
Yeah, because it didn't have any support, which would be like the flame to keep it going. It didn't have international friends, and basically the opponent it was against was the papacy, which had not only support in Italy itself and all of Rome, it also had
like
support.
International support.
Exactly.
Yeah, France
Spain,
comes in and
France,
occupies the city later on.
For 20 years. So
20 years. It takes an entirely different war to get them out of the city.
Yeah, so Mazzini overall, really, just to conclude most of Mazzini, and we'll go back to him in a bit, but to conclude most of Mazzini, he was a spark, he was the initiative, he started it all, but he wasn't really successful. The Young Italy was too middle and upper class, didn't have many lower class, or if any, lower class supporters. His writings were too complex. He was always in exile, so he couldn't lead properly, and he wasn't very sophisticated. He was too sophisticated to lead. Yeah, he wasn't. He was very sophisticated. He was too sophisticated to lead. And the Roman Republic.
Garibaldi, in a way, is exactly the opposite. He's not sophisticated at all. He performs actions in complete opposition to what would be politically correct to do.
Yeah,
it's like he tries to invade Rome, which is generally not a good idea in history.
Yeah, but the thing is
except that one time it was.
I mean, they got out.
At least it's sort of like the thing about Mazzini to finally conclude is that because the Roman Republic worked as a republic, and it showed that his work could work. His ideas, could work. His work could work. Jeez. His ideas could work.
Before we move on, it's like I like the way you said he was too sophisticated. I just like to imagine he like walks around the poshest part of the country, just head held high, just looking at all the like aristocrats. Look at these peasants. That house only has 12 stories.
I wouldn't say he's like that. I think it's just
it's just like that's what I like.
It does sound
that's
like
just
that.
What I've It's
just he. I think as a person, he wasn't too sophisticated because he had the ability to lead.
Yeah, it's just his writing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just his writing. So
Yeah.
under Garibaldi, who was massively inspired by Mazzini, he was
Yes,
He's got a sweet hat in the pictures I found of him.
he's got a great beard as well.
he was a far
His
greater.
his hairline
Far
though.
greater.
Oof.
Italian
So-
Rasputin.
Garibaldi, very early on, he's a merchant navy officer in his early life. He's from Nice, which will be important later. So he joins the secret society of Young Italy in 1833 while delivering a shipment of oranges.
Ooh,
Oh,
He
yes.
oathed himself to liberate and unify Italy,
And for speaking
but
of oranges,
practically
I
the
have
rest of his
some
life.
At least
At
he had
that
goals.
point, he goes to South America and he involves himself in all the conflicts within the Brazilian Empire, trying to free some of the Brazilian Empire's conquest from the Brazilian Empire, where
Yeah, as you
him and
do.
his 1,000 get very famous for their patented red shirts. It's different from the red jackets, whatever. And then after that point, we have the Independence Wars of 1848, where he returns and involves himself with. He tries to get in with Piedmont to fight against the Austrians. They refuse him. He moves on to Lombardy at that point. At which point he actually wins quite a few times against the Austrian armies. But eventually Lombardy does fall, and he then moves on to the Roman Republic with his good old friend Mazzini, where he manages to actually hold off the Austrian army for almost 2 months.
I mean, that's a good feat, because he didn't really have quite a large army at that time, did
No,
he?
he's a guerrilla force. He's a very, very small army. I think it's 4,000
Yeah.
strong at this point.
yeah,
But
exactly.
in an attritional war, you're not going to last that long against a force that big.
Yeah, like, no matter what your
eventually,
tactics are,
on
you are going to just fall.
1st and 2nd of July, both sides signed a truce, and this is where Mazzini runs off to London for pretty much the rest of his life. And Garibaldi does return to exile again in the Americas, and he takes part in the American Civil War. I think on the not the Confederate side, the other one. Forget the name of it.
The Union.
The Union, that's the one. He wouldn't return to Italy again until 1854, where he buys himself half an island north of Sardinia.
As you do.
Yeah, well, it's with his brother's inheritance money. He wants to chill out on a farm for the rest of his life because he's kind of done with it. Then
Fair enough.
the Sardinian War, the Piedmont, big Piedmont again, decides to declare war. Well, they encourage war with Austria, which is the Second War of Independence, which Piedmont actually encourages France to help them with. Of course, Garibaldi, being the absolute Chadian that he is, decides to go to
Chadian.
Piedmont. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
and he helps out, and he wins quite a few more battles as well, and he kind of aligns himself with the new king, Victor Emmanuel, and the Prime Minister Cavour.
Well,
You know, always a good thing.
This sets him up. This sets him up for his expedition later. After the war, though.
Sorry, Gavin. It's weird because he's good friends with Victor Emmanuel, but Victor Emmanuel.
He's actually not.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Victor Emmanuel only is friends with him when he needs him, and Cavour and
Victor Emmanuel
both
recognizes
don't
him as
trust
a tool that he can use.
Yeah, they're more
exactly.
sort of like acquaintances.
Yeah.
Knew each other.
He very much did not get along with Cavour, though.
No.
Yeah.
They had complete contrasting ideals about Italy's future.
I remember reading somewhere that Garibaldi saw him as, quote, too political.
Yes, which is,
too liberal,
to be fair,
to the point of being obnoxious.
To be fair, though, Garibaldi was all action. He wasn't very political at all. So
again, exact
shows.
opposites.
Yeah,
he's do ask questions later sort of guy.
Yeah,
but I mean, it can work in some circumstances, but
it does work in this circumstance.
To be fair to Garibaldi,
yeah.
though, he is the more crucial one. He does unify the South, so
So after the Second War of Independence, Piedmont comes under this problem of it's expanded, it's unified most of the North, but due to political restrictions and not really wanting to expand anymore, the South remains in sort of its own independent area underneath the Bourbon Kings, which are established by the Austrians as a puppet state of sorts.
To imagine a bunch of bottles of bourbon wearing crowns.
I mean, that's where the name comes from.
See, Callum, you are so dad zone.
Back on the topic of Nice. So, Nice, being the sort of city that Garibaldi is from, part of the agreement that France would join on Piedmont's side against Austria in the Second Independence War was that two states, Nice and Savoy, would be ceded to France. So, understandably, Garibaldi gets quite upset with Victor Emmanuel over this. That's kind of where, on his side of the relationship, he falls off with Victor Emmanuel quite a bit. But he is still encouraged by Mazzini, which keeps him going on. He sees it as a necessary evil to keep going with unification. Yeah. So, on the 5th of May, Garibaldi, after
fuel for the revolutionary train.
Essentially. So on the 5th of May, Garibaldi, with the permission of Victor Emmanuel, sails for Sicily, which is the island south of Sardinia and west of southern Italy. And
absolutely successful. Absolutely.
Over the next 10 days, he, with the help of the Royal Navy, which wasn't really needed since the Bourbon Navy was kind of off somewhere else.
Yeah. They were the other side of the country.
Within 10, 20 days, basically. By the 15th of May, the same month, same year, 1960, they take the island.
Yeah. 1860.
The conquest of Sicily and Naples was one of the greatest ventures of his life, wasn't it? It's sort of a big thing.
Basically his biggest naval achievement ever.
Yeah, because it also is massively successful because it only takes him, 15, 20 days.
It takes him 10 days.
Yeah,
in total, it takes him 15 days because he's got to get across there.
Yeah. But he also
the actual conquest itself, 10 days.
However,
it's insane to think about that you could do something that massive in such a
my apologies, when he takes the capital on 29th, it takes him an entire month, but that's still impressive.
Yeah.
You could.
If you think about it, it takes Nazi Germany 6 weeks to conquer France with an entire strategic level force.
My only issue with saying that achievement, it was by far his greatest achievement, but to say that it was perfect, I think it gave him a lot. I think
he got very lucky.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah,
nothing's perfect
because the army was the Bourbon army was at the Bourbon Navy was at the complete other opposite end of the country. So end of the state. So it was impossible for them to fight Garibaldi. And then when he turned up, the people loved him. So in that respect, people he didn't fight anybody.
Any resistance, really.
No, he got more people than he started with because people loved him so much.
I mean, while he's in control of the island, he's sort of the established government at the time. He actually raises more troops while he's on the island.
He doesn't actually fight anybody.
Before he moves on the 18th of August.
Garibaldi was far more successful than Mazzini, but I think it also it was luck, circumstance, and but also his his personality. Mazzini was so difficult to understand. None of the lower class liked him. Garibaldi was
at the same time. Garibaldi is this working class man who's from this very, very honest, humble background.
Yeah,
so they can really rally behind.
He's still middle class because he's still middle class though because he supports Mazzini and is part of young Italy.
He's middle class purely because of the fortune he's earned at this point, but he's came from a humble background. That's the reason people
of course,
get behind him.
Of course.
Because of his status now and how he began, it's sort of he can relate to both sides of the spectrum. He can he can bring them together.
Yeah, and I also think that it helps him in some way that he's not very political at all because he can't get into political arguments. He is sort of like a chess piece for the political people. So Victor Emmanuel uses him, Mazzini inspires him, he sets him up sort of thing. He's the crucial chess piece or piece of the puzzle that he is far more important than Mazzini. Or basically, I think he's more important.
He's physically a lot more important than Mazzini.
And I think generally because he is supported by most people in Italy, whereas as we were saying earlier, Mazzini is not supported by any of the lower class, which cuts out probably 2/3 of the population.
So he's sort of like a pawn. So like he's simple, but you can do so much if you know since he knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
I think another part of it is again on the Northern Italy front, they couldn't expand any further because of political reasons. Of course, the other major powers they see a new because Italy hasn't existed up until this point. They see a new major power rising. They're not going to want that. They want to put it down with basically the exception of France and England. I think after the Second War of Independence, it's Russia, Prussia, and Austria that have a meeting about what to actually do about Italy. And I believe they come to the conclusion that if expansion continues, that they were probably going to involve themselves militarily.
Yeah.
But Garibaldi, in this case, he's seen as just a freedom fighter. He's not actually seen as politically connected to Northern Italy at this point.
Yeah.
So he doesn't face any of that reprimand.
He's critical. He's a very critical figure, and without him, he wouldn't have unification. So I think he's vitally important, and I think I personally believe he's the most important individual in unification.
Sort of like the artery of the revolution.
Sort of. He's the central figure, basically.
Yeah.
For the South in particular. I think for the North, you can make an argument it's probably Cavour.
Yeah,
possibly, I suppose, because I agree, because Cavour does allow industrialization and boost the North and Piedmont so much that actually they become the superpower that attracts the South to be unified. Because when Garibaldi went and did his expedition to Sicily and Naples, one of the big draws for the South was the fact that he was doing it under the name of Victor Emmanuel, and Victor Emmanuel and the North showed such prosperity and wealth that the South had never seen before. So it was sort of like he was the figure for unification, but he was also the figure for wealth and prosperity, and he was a working class figure. So not only did he do the wealth, he did the fact he could actually physically unify, but the fact that he was the figure for the society as a whole, not only lower but upper, sort of shows. I think he is the most critical figure overall for unification.
I mean, his successes don't even start with Sicily. I've got more notes here on his conquest of the South, which on 18th of August, of course, after raising more troops, he crosses the straits into southern Italy without even asking permission from Victor Emmanuel or Cavour, of which he again takes pretty much the entire South without any resistance. On the 7th of September, he enters the capital, Naples, on a train, with absolutely no resistance, to be praised by the crowds. And he was planning to move north into the Papal States as well, but he was stopped by the Piedmontese army because they didn't want any of the other world powers to get involved.
To anchor everything.
Yeah, so they basically took the Papal States essentially as a buffer zone to keep them out of Rome.
He was critical. He really was critical, and it's just, I think, because he was so loved, it allowed him to do so much.
Yeah.
And this goes even further into the unification. So the actual union, so at Tiano, 1860, 21st of October, Garibaldi and Victor Emmanuel meet, and by the 7th of November, Garibaldi formally cedes all of his conquests to Victor Emmanuel, and that cements unification of pretty much all of Italy apart from Rome and Venice.
Yeah, but then Venice is done later, and
Venice is done later, and Garibaldi you can drag him into that as well.
Yeah, but
in a way, but he's not directly involved.
I think that if you were going to ever have a downfall for Garibaldi, apart from the fact he's not diplomatic, but then you could say that was not very political.
I think it's his relations with Piedmont itself, which kind of excluded him from further inclusion in unification.
I think you could also say the fact he never took Rome properly.
I think when he attempted to take Rome, he kind of burnt his bridges with with Parliament in Piedmont.
Yeah,
so he
true, very
couldn't
true.
really involve himself
No, it's
past that.
he's crucial, but he does have his flaws.
Mm.
Yeah.
And,
So like,
yeah,
he
and you could
tries
also,
to do too much.
Yeah,
you could also bring in later on when it comes to the Austro-Prussian War. Italy fatally suffers from not having a military experience of someone like Garibaldi. As much as I don't think Garibaldi would be too useful in a pre-dreadnought battleship engagement like one that Italy found itself in, having the experience of officers like him would have helped a lot.
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think we should conclude with a few closing statements?
I mean, we should probably conclude with what obstacles they faced and how they eventually overcame them. So, of course, with Garibaldi, he obviously faced political obstruction. He on the political side, he really couldn't involve himself. Though I think Cavour was really the one that countered that on his side. He really kept international relationships very strong, especially with France.
Yeah.
I think Mazzini's biggest obstacle was actually himself. Because
in a way, yeah. I think the probably social class divide is probably what hit him the hardest.
Yeah, because he alienated the lower classes with his over-complex writing that not even political leaders of international countries could understand, because in 48...
and international intervention, probably.
Yeah, because I suppose... But my issue is, the question is, how did he overcome the obstacle? I don't think he really did ever overcome the obstacle
me neither.
Of his complex.
Garibaldi sort of worked around it.
Yeah,
so
Garibaldi...
he knew it was there, and he tried to fix it.
Garibaldi overcame his obstacles because he still managed to unify North and South together. All of the South was critical. But Mazzini was ignored by the lower classes.
I mean, for much of Garibaldi's life, the obstacle he came with his goals was international intervention again, but you kind of see him overcome that with aligning himself with Piedmont in the second Independence War.
Yeah.
Where they actually managed to come to a sort of stalemate and sort of allowed the North to become independent of Austria.
I think that Mazzini, the fact that he was over complex, didn't help the lower class at all, was terrible at leading physically, didn't have any experience or ability because he exiled himself too much.
Yeah.
His biggest obstacle was himself. He exiled. Yeah. He was just a poor leader. He was over complex, and I think that unlike Garibaldi, whose biggest obstacle actually was an obstacle in international forces and powers and things like that, Mazzini's biggest obstacle was him.
Yeah, so I think Mazzini, one of the only things he had going for him really was that he was high class, so he had influence. So that's sort of what pushed him most of the way.
I think if you could combine the two into one, you'd have a perfect revolutionary figure.
Because
if you have the support from the masses, which is the lower class, yet you have the support of the resources of the middle and upper class,
and the ability to communicate properly with the middle and upper class and the international powers that Mazzini, despite the fact that he was a bit complex, could actually govern well, and it was proven in the Roman Republic when he was put head of government in the triumvirate.
I think Mazzini was a lot more politically conscious than Garibaldi was.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the advantages you could say Garibaldi has over, well, not Garibaldi, Mazzini has over Garibaldi.
Yeah,
I think he took into account what could happen with his actions.
Yeah, and Garibaldi really didn't. Garibaldi went for it.
Garibaldi, he went for it, and it worked out.
Yeah.
So I've just realised, I didn't realise I had this earlier. Though I've got a picture of Mazzini, I haven't looked at it properly, I've just realised he looks exactly like Megamind. I know this has nothing to do with it, I've just put it in the chat.
Right, well, because this has been 25 minutes now.
It's fine.
I think we should conclude.
I think just to conclude, whenever. I think we should say in conclusion who we think was more important out of the two, and who overcame the obstacles better, and who was just generally a final comparison of the two.
Okay, and I think Garibaldi was probably, even though Mazzini had influence, I think by the end of all of this, Garibaldi probably ended up with more influence, just because of his status as a national hero. He appeals more to the masses, and the fact that he could actually physically enforce his ideals, and actually enforces Mazzini's ideals.
Yeah. I have to 100% agree, because